For centuries, the divine feminine has been silenced, sidelined, or patiently waiting. Waiting for recognition, waiting for balance, waiting for the masculine to meet her with equal reverence and healing. But that era is ending. Across cultures and spiritual traditions, a rising wave of feminine energy is reclaiming space, voice, and power, no longer seeking permission or rescue, but instead stepping fully into sovereignty. This is not an act of rebellion against the masculine, but a liberation from the illusion that she must wait for it to evolve before she can. The divine feminine is no longer willing to delay her truth, creativity, or leadership while the world catches up. She is no longer dimming her light to protect fragile egos or outdated systems. Instead, she is leading from intuition, embodiment, and fierce compassion, awakening a new paradigm where wholeness is no longer postponed. This moment marks a threshold, a call for integration rather than imbalance, for mutual evolution rather than dependency. The divine feminine has arrived, not to wait, but to rise. The rise of sovereign feminine power, reclaiming wholeness without permission. The divine feminine is no longer content with fragments of her power, offered through conditional acceptance or filtered through patriarchal lenses. She is rising in her full spectrum, wild and wise, intuitive and intelligent, nurturing and fierce. This rise is not a reaction, but a return, a reclamation of a power that was never truly lost, only buried beneath centuries of suppression, shame, and silence. Sovereignty means self-rule. It is the deep, embodied knowing that a woman does not need to be chosen, determined, or completed by anything outside of herself. Not a man, not a system, not even a spiritual ideal. This inner authority is not cold or closed off. It is rooted in love, wholeness, and radical self-respect. It refuses to shrink in order to be palatable, and it no longer performs femininity to be deemed worthy. In this new paradigm, the divine feminine honors her cycles, her voice, her body, and her vision. She creates, not out of scarcity or fear, but from an overflowing well of inner alignment. She no longer seeks the masculine to validate her path. Instead, she welcomes healthy masculine energy as a conscious collaborator, an ally, not a rescuer. The sovereign feminine does not dominate or degrade the masculine. She simply refuses to wait. She leads where she is called, speaks when truth arises, and heals from within. Her power is not about control, it's about coherence with her soul. As more women and men reconnect with this archetypal energy, a global shift is taking place. The rise of the sovereign feminine is not just a trend, it is a spiritual, emotional, and societal evolution. And it begins with one truth. She is whole. She has always been. And now she remembers. From partnership to parallel empowerment, redefining sacred union. The concept of sacred union has long been idealized as the pinnacle of spiritual and romantic fulfillment, a merging of divine masculine and divine feminine energies into harmonious oneness. But for too long, this vision has been tangled in outdated paradigms. One partner chasing while the other retreats, one healing while the other resists, one waiting while the other withholds. The divine feminine, once conditioned to be the keeper of emotional labor and spiritual patience, is no longer willing to uphold relationships built on imbalance, projection, or delay. We are entering a new era where sacred union is being redefined, not as fusion, but as parallel empowerment. In this new framework, union is no longer the goal that completes us, but the outcome that naturally arises when two sovereign beings walk in alignment. The divine feminine is done compromising her growth, vision, or soul's timing to accommodate a partner who is not yet willing to meet her where she stands. She no longer tolerates dynamics rooted in potential rather than presence. This is not rejection, it is redirection toward wholeness, authenticity, and trust in divine timing. The end of spiritual codependence. Many so-called spiritual partnerships have quietly mirrored old patterns of emotional codependency. The feminine, celebrated for her nurturing and healing gifts, has often taken on the role of spiritual midwife for the masculine, waiting for him to awaken, change, or soften before the relationship could truly begin. This dynamic, while often unconscious, has become a drain on her power. The rise of the sovereign feminine ends this cycle. She no longer defines her worth by how much she can hold, fix, or endure. She no longer invests her sacred energy into awakening someone who has not chosen to awaken themselves. The new sacred union begins when both parties have turned inward, done their own shadow work, and emerged not as half-filled cups, but as overflowing vessels of self-love and spiritual maturity. The shift to sovereign partnership. In parallel empowerment, both the feminine and masculine operate from wholeness. They are not looking for completion in each other. They are looking for reflection, resonance, and expansion. Each maintains their autonomy while honoring the sacred space they co-create. This is not a loss of intimacy, but a deepening of it, rooted in mutual respect, energetic integrity, and spiritual alignment. There is no chasing, no fixing, no rescuing, only witnessing, receiving, and responding with presence. In this space, the feminine does not shrink to soothe the masculine's wounds, and the masculine does not dominate to protect his ego. Instead, they stand side by side, facing the world, not each other's brokenness. The feminine is not afraid to walk away from unions that dilute her frequency. She trusts that the sacred masculine will rise in his own time, on his own path. And if they meet again, it will be from choice, not need. Sacred union as evolutionary collaboration. True sacred union in this new age is not a reward, it is a responsibility. It is an evolutionary collaboration between two souls committed to growth, truth, and service. It thrives not because one sacrifices for the other, but because both are aligned with something greater than themselves. The divine feminine leads by living fully, not waiting passively. She does not slow her pace or silence her voice to keep a partner beside her. Instead, she trusts that her clarity will magnetize those who can walk with her, not behind her. As the feminine reclaims her full power, she invites the masculine not to save her, but to stand beside her, not to dominate her, but to join her. In this new way of relating, the sacred union is not delayed, it becomes inevitable, healing the feminine wound, rising beyond the pain of patriarchy. The pain carried by the divine feminine is ancient. It is personal, collective, and ancestral, woven into the stories of mothers, grandmothers, daughters, and sisters who were silenced, shamed, burned, blamed, and broken for simply being who they were. This pain is not just historical. It lives in the body, in the voice, in the nervous system of every woman who has been told she is too much, too emotional, too sensitive, too wild, too powerful. This is the feminine wound, a deep and often invisible injury to the sacred feminine essence, caused by centuries of living under systems that devalued feminine energy and expression. Patriarchy taught women to mistrust themselves, to fear their own intuition, to compete with each other, and to diminish their power for safety or survival. But the feminine is remembering, and she is rising, not just in protest, but in healing. The wound beneath the roles. Many women have lived for generations behind roles they were forced to perform. The caretaker, the martyr, the people pleaser, the obedient daughter, the accommodating partner. These roles were survival strategies, ways to stay safe in a world that punished female power. But they also disconnected women from their authentic essence, leading to exhaustion, resentment, and self-abandonment. Healing the feminine wound means peeling back these layers of identity and returning to the truth beneath the mask. It means feeling the grief, the rage, the betrayal, not to stay stuck in it, but to release it. This is not weakness. It is sacred alchemy. From trauma to sovereignty, the feminine wound shows up in the body, in the throat that tightens when she wants to speak, in the womb that stores unprocessed grief, in the heart that closes after too much betrayal. Healing requires more than intellectual understanding. It demands embodiment, presence, and gentleness. As she heals, the divine feminine begins to rewire her inner world. She learns to trust her intuition again. She softens into her truth. She sets boundaries, not to reject others, but to honor herself. She reclaims her sensuality, her emotional wisdom, her spiritual gifts, not as tools of manipulation, but as sacred parts of who she is. This healing is not linear. It is messy, non-linear, and deeply sacred. But it leads to one inevitable truth. She is not broken. She was never broken. She was wounded, but she is healing. Healing as rebellion, healing as revolution. In a world that profits from her silence, a healed woman is revolutionary. She becomes untamed, unashamed, unafraid. She no longer waits for systems, partners, or society to give her permission to be whole. She gives that to herself. Healing the feminine wound is not only for women, it is for humanity. Because when the feminine rises healed, the entire world begins to balance. The earth heals. Relationships transform. Children grow up with different models of strength. The masculine, too, is freed from the burden of domination and invited into his own healing. This is how the feminine rises, not by demanding power, but by remembering she always had it. Not by retaliating, but by returning to herself, fully, fiercely, freely. New templates of power, feminine leadership without masculine blueprint. For too long, power has worn a narrow mask, shaped by conquest, control, dominance, and hierarchy. These masculine-coded blueprints have defined success in business, governance, and even spirituality. But the divine feminine is no longer trying to lead by fitting into frameworks that were never built for her. She is now creating new templates of power, ones that arise from embodiment, intuition, collaboration, and deep inner wisdom. This is not about reversing roles or replacing the masculine. It is about stepping outside the old paradigm entirely. Feminine leadership is not simply the feminine acting like the masculine. It is the emergence of an entirely different way of leading, being, and building. Beyond the linear and hierarchical. The masculine model of power tends to be linear. Set goals, move fast, dominate competition, rise to the top. While this structure has its place, it often leaves little room for rest, reflection, or relationship. Feminine leadership reclaims cyclical wisdom, honouring rhythms, seasons, emotions, and collective evolution. It values depth over speed, process over product, and intuition alongside strategy. In the new paradigm, a leader is not defined by titles or external validation, but by her capacity to hold space, move with integrity, and inspire through embodiment, not force. She doesn't lead from the top of a hierarchy. She leads from the center of a circle. She doesn't command obedience. She cultivates resonance. This is power that doesn't dominate. It magnetizes, redefining strength and influence. Feminine leadership embraces vulnerability as strength, not weakness. It creates environments where truth can be spoken, emotions can be felt, and healing can occur. It acknowledges that we lead not just through decisions, but through our presence, our energy, and our ability to listen deeply. The feminine does not need to become louder to be heard. She becomes clearer. She doesn't need to outfight others. She out-aligns them. Her influence comes not from overpowering, but from being unapologetically in her truth. This kind of power may look quiet on the surface, but its ripple is profound. It transforms teams, families, communities. It softens hardened spaces and brings coherence to chaos. It doesn't push forward blindly. It pauses, senses, and then moves with precision. The rebirth of creation-centered leadership. The old masculine blueprint says, build to win. The new feminine template says, build to nurture, to heal, to evolve. Feminine leadership doesn't just produce results, it births transformation. Whether in entrepreneurship, activism, art, or governance, she creates systems that are life-giving, sustainable, and soul-aligned. Her leadership makes space for others to rise with her, not beneath her. She trusts the unseen. She listens to what is not said. She leads with heart and womb as much as mind and voice. And in doing so, she teaches the world a different kind of power. One rooted not in domination, but in deep presence, fierce love, and radical authenticity. Living the new blueprint. To lead in this way is to often walk without a map, but not without direction. The divine feminine is no longer looking for permission or modelling her voice after old structures. She is listening inward and leading from there. Her path is not always understood by the systems she disrupts, but it is necessary for the new world being born. She is not here to reform the old empire. She is here to build something entirely new.